Well, it's good to actually see Sheila with us after all this time that she has been there, and she's finally here. I had to ask who this new woman was. We haven't seen her for so long, but it's good that you're with us. Continue to pray for Charles. He's not going to Regis today. He is doing rehabilitation after his stroke, and he will be going to Regis afterwards as soon as he's getting movement back in his leg and arm, and so he's progressing. But they're doing rehab at the hospital. There's evidently Gems is full down at Palmerston, so he has to stay at the hospital. But he's improving. You've got to listen very hard to understand what he says, but he misses the church, he misses the morning teas, he misses everything about it. So just pray for him. This morning, are you angry, or why are you angry? Now let me ask you this morning, how many people sitting here have never got angry in their life? Never. Would you put that hand up again, Rob? I must. Well, it tickled my fancy, that one, but I could have used a bloke with it, but I wanted us to get the idea of anger, because anger is something that as human beings we all experience. We're either on the receiving end or we're on the giving end, and it's not a nice feeling. And we've been looking at some questions that have been asked, that God had asked Adam. Where are you? Who are you listening to? And last week we looked at, what have you done? And today he asks another question in Genesis of Cain. And he asks him a very interesting question. He says, why are you angry? Why are you allowing it to control you? And basically, what other grievances are you hiding? Because anger is just one emotion. There are many emotions that we tend to hide. And what God is asking us, because he knows why he's angry, he knows everything, but he's asking Cain, why are you angry? He wants him to consider, and he wants us to consider and listen to what our emotions are telling us regarding our goals and our ambitions and our expectations. Because our emotions work in all of these things. What happens if you don't meet your expectation? How do you react? Oh, that's wonderful. You are full of animation this morning. You just let it fly over the top of your head. It doesn't affect you at all, does it? Do you get frustrated? Do you get angry? Of course, because your expectations haven't been met. And that challenges us. How are we responding to situations, people, and circumstances that will either hinder or obstruct us from getting what we want? Today, we look at Cain, and we look at how his anger got the better of him when he chose to ignore God's instructions, not to allow it to control him. If you've got your Bibles, turn to Genesis 4, 1-7. If you haven't got it, it's up on the screen. And our passage said, Adam had sexual relations with his wife Eve. She became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. Eve said, with the Lord's help, I've given birth to a man. After that, Eve gave birth to Cain's brother Abel. Abel took care of flocks. Cain became a farmer. Later, Cain bought some food from the ground as a gift to God. Abel bought the best parts from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord accepted Abel and his gift, but he did not accept Cain and his gift. So Cain became very angry and felt rejected. The Lord asked Cain, why are you angry? Why do you look so unhappy? If you do things well, I'll accept you. But if you do not do them well, sin is already ready to attack you. Sin wants you, but you must rule over it. Now, The first question I ask myself is this: what are the characteristics of anger? What are the characteristics of anger? Now, everybody sitting here knows what anger is. What are its characteristics? You've had first-hand experience. What are some of the characteristics of anger? Yeah? You're not going to tell me much today at all, are you? Let me ask you, what is the trigger point when it comes to anger for you? What sets you off? What button needs to be pushed to get a response of anger from you? At least you're honest. We all have trigger points. We all have buttons that somebody can push. And as soon as they push it, we know, bang, we respond. Now, some define anger as a strong feeling of annoyance, displeasure, or hostility. But you know, in our modern day and age, anger is becoming a bigger problem than what it ever has before. People are freely expressing their emotions against people and situations they don't like. They don't appreciate certain people, and rather than controlling it, they let it rip. And often, when they let it rip, it has far-reaching consequences that not only affect the individuals, but other people as well. Now, if you've been watching the media, I think it was the Grammys where Will Smith got up and went whack in anger. That was the emotion that was described. Don't you talk to my wife like that? And then he went and apologized with tears. Did it have any effect on the people that were there? Yes. Did it have any effect on the person that was on the receiving end? Yes. Did it have any effect on Will Smith? Yes. There are consequences to actions. Now, I also know that I don't want to be around angry people. Do you? You can always tell when someone's in a bad mood. You can always tell when they got out of the wrong side of the bed. And you say, whoa, give them some space. Get out of the way. I don't want to be in that space with that person. Because you don't want to be with angry people. Because you never know when you'll be on the receiving end of it. It shows itself when you're offended, when you're ticked off, when you're grumpy, when you're hurt, when you're out of sorts, resentful, irritated, and frustrated. This is an emotion that every human being experiences. And it's one of the basic emotions we have. Because we can be sad, we can be glad, we can be afraid, we can be ashamed. And what these emotions do, they affect our physical health as well as our mental health and our spiritual health. And if we don't confront them and deal with them, we're going to have problems. And I found this illustration, I've used it before, but it still is true. Anger is like an iceberg. It's like an iceberg. Now, what do I mean by that? On the top, you can see the surface. And anger, we can see the end result of it. Something has triggered something in us and we've responded. But what is it? And you'll find that under here, you have all these, under the iceberg, you have all the things that contribute to anger. There are emotions, and they're there. They really are. And anger is a warning light. And when it goes on, it's telling you and it's telling me something is wrong. And it requires our immediate attention. Now, if you have a car, now I know people don't look at their dashboard much these days, because you can be driving along and everything, and all of a sudden, if you've got a modern car, there's a light flashes and you hear the ding, ding, ding. That says, look at me, There's a problem. Fix it. And of course, you can ignore it, and what happens? Well, your motor stops or something stops because you refuse to pay attention to that warning sign. And anger is a warning sign that says something's wrong. Have a look at what's doing it. And unresolved anger makes us unhappy. It damages personal relationships, and it also damages other relationships that we may have in the community. And that's why we need to look at it. Where it comes from, how to deal with it before it becomes a bigger problem than what it already is. Now, I often feel like this. The complications of anger. Anger isn't just an outward physical action. It's something that affects our emotional well-being, and a physician shares how it affects us physically. And I'm going to put this up because this touches a few of the things that the physician actually brings out. The brain shunts blood away from the gut towards the muscles in preparation for physical exertion. Heart rate, blood pressure, respiration increases, the body temperature rises and the skin perspires. The mind is sharpened and focused. The constant flood of stress chemicals and associated metabolic changes that go with recurrent unmanaged anger can eventually cause harm to many different systems of the body. Some of the short and long-term health problems that have been linked to unmanaged anger include headaches, digestion problems, insomnia, increased anxiety, depression, high blood pressure, skin problems, heart attack and stroke. That's a few, isn't it? All the underlying the iceberg. In other words, anger is just a warning that there's something that's wrong, and we need to have a look at it. Uncontrolled anger also weakens our immune system, harms our lungs, will shorten our lives. It's very dangerous to our health. So that's from a physician's perspective. There's complications. This little fella might catch it as well. There are three things: anger in, anger out, and anger controlled. Anger is generally expressed in one of three forms, as mentioned here. Anger in is turning our anger inwards. What do I mean by that? And it depends often on our personalities. I'm not a very demonstrative person. I don't really show my emotions. I don't let it hang out, so to speak. If something's bothering me, I suppress it or I keep it within. I don't blab to this person or tell that person I got a problem. I keep it within. And what happens when you keep something within? It's like a volcano. Something else triggers it and boom, it happens. That's anger in. And I wonder how many people here this morning keep their anger in. Because that's going to affect physically, mentally, our well-being. It really does. And I'm not saying let it all hang out. I'm saying you might be a person that keeps your anger in. Because we hold anger in, there are negative effects on our physical bodies and our mental health. When we hold the anger in, we're still angry. And because we're still angry, that anger has nowhere to go. It's looking for an outlet, somewhere to let go. And, you know, you ask people, how are you going? Oh, I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm doing well. Happy face. But underneath, I'm boiling, I'm simmering, I'm ready to go. But we don't tell people that. We give people the impression everything's okay. And it might be a good thing to hold in for those around us so they're not on the receiving end, but it's harmful to us as individuals. So how do we let it out? Anger out is expressing anger outwardly in ways that includes physical assault on people or objects and hostile verbal assaults. Now, this is a person who just lets their anger control them, you know. It doesn't take much to chuff them off, and next thing they're smashing doors and windows and hurling things and kicking things and just blah, it's out there. And I've heard confessions of people saying, you know what, I felt really good about telling that bloke off. It really felt good to get it out. And if you know someone like this, you've probably seen them smile and calm down afterwards, but they don't even consider the impact on the person or the object that anger was directed at them. Now, I remember when I was in college, and there was a pastor from the US came across, and he was teaching about anger. And I thought, yeah, I related to him. And he said that a friend of his in the church made this padded box. It was soundproof and it was padded. And the object was, and it was given an invitation to any members of the congregation, that when you felt frustrated or irritated about life or anyone else, you stepped into that thing and you let it out. You screamed at the top of your voice and you punched the padded things, and then once you've done that, you could walk out and you would be a calmer person. I thought, what a great idea. He said after the morning services, there was a big queue to get in. Now, whether he was the object of anger, I don't know, but it was well used. People describe the out of anger feelings and a sense of powerlessness when they practice both anger in and anger out methods. So there's two types of ways of coping with anger. Let it out or keep it in. None of them are good. As we go to our passage, in verse 8 it says, "And Cain said to his brother, 'Let us go out to the field.' And when they were in the field, Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him." In this verse, I believe you've got two ways of anger that is expressed. You've got the anger in and the anger out. Cain was experiencing anger in when God addressed him and asked him why he was angry. He experienced anger out when he rose out and killed his brother. Rose up and killed his brother. Cain's anger grew within him until he could no longer hold it, and he let it out against his brother. The Bible tells us that we are to love one another, unlike Cain. 1 John 3, 11 and 12 says, "For this is the message that you heard from the beginning. We should love one another, not as Cain, who was of the wicked one, and murdered his brother." And why did he murder him? Because his works were evil and his brother's righteous. But there's a third way to deal with anger, and that's to control it. It's a preferred way. Practicing anger control, or dealing with anger in an appropriate manner. It's the best and only way to deal with it. And there are a number of scriptures which I'll put up that you can follow. I'll just read them for you, because the Bible has a lot to say about anger and how to deal with it. In Proverbs 15:18, "A wrathful man stirs up strife, but he who is slow to anger allays contention." In Proverbs again, "Make no friendship with an angry man. With a furious man do not go, lest you learn his ways and set a snare for your soul. A fool vents all his feelings, but a wise man holds them back." In Ecclesiastes, "Do not hasten in your spirit to be angry, for anger rests in the bosom of fool." Colossians 3:8, "But now you yourselves are to put off these things: anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy language out of your mouths." Each of these scriptures speaks of the outcome of anger. If we meditate on these scriptures, we find the wisdom to begin asking ourselves 4 questions when we get angry. What am I angry about? What would Jesus be angry over this? If Jesus would be angry about this, how would he respond? And is my response the same as I believe Jesus' response would be? Good questions to ask yourself. Why am I angry in the first place? Why do I get angry? What's the real issue? And the cause of anger, well, this might help. Here you have underlying things, feelings of powerless, building anger, frustration, pain, fear, all of them. They're all hidden away. They show themselves from various times in the things we do, but the cause of anger has so many other issues associated with it. And it's important that you and I understand how anger works. In our account today, it's of one person being angry with another. And we look at Cain and his anger. And the first thing, the cause of anger, it begins where? With our thoughts. It begins up here. It begins with our thoughts in reaction to something that's happened or happens to us or something that's said. Now, if I'm in a car and someone cuts me off, how am I going to react? And what's my thought? You idiot! Didn't you see me? Get some glasses or something. You know, it's my thoughts. How dare you cut me off? In other words, you've infringed on my rights. I'm doing what's right and you're doing what's wrong. It starts up here. And this is the event that triggers our actions. Our thoughts or thinking is our perception of what we think takes place. Now, we cannot blame the event or the person for our anger. Now, a person might cut us off, but they're not responsible for the way that I respond. They're not responsible for the action of anger. They might understand it, but they're not responsible. I am. I am the one that chooses how to respond. I'm responsible for my own action and my own anger. Nobody else. I can't blame anything or anybody else. I choose to respond that way. In our account in Scripture, Cain and Abel bring their offerings to God. The problem for Cain is that God looked with favour on Abel and his offering. And he looked at Cain and he didn't do so with favour. This is the situation. God's looking at both offerings, both the individuals who bought it. One's favoured and one's not. So can you see what's starting to happen in Cain's mind? It starts with thinking. Cain perceives the problem is not his offering. The problem is his brother. His brother got one up on him. He gave a better sacrifice. So, he's my problem. I need to deal with that problem. So if I get rid of Cain, then I get rid of my problem. That's how it thinks. It's wrong thinking. And I'm sure if we had asked Cain today, he would have seen things differently. If Cain could have seen that the problem was not with Abel, but with himself, if he could have seen Abel give his best to God and how he had just brought some of the fruit from the soil, if he could have seen that he had to deal with his own attitude toward God, if he could have figured out what God told him later, if you do what is right, will you not be accepted? So how we perceive a situation affects how we choose to respond to it. To think clearly and understand, we need to have all the facts before we respond to situations. We can get angry without having all the facts. We don't know everything. I'm sorry, guys, you don't know everything. Particularly, this is something that we can choose. We do respond in anger when expectations, when things are not going the way that we think they are. And often in marriage relationships, it's the wife who ends up being on the receiving end because the husband perceives she hasn't done this or should have done this or could have done that. He hasn't spent time to find out what the facts are, why she responds this way, and of course there's conflict. Except if you're a perfect husband like Rob. There has to be an exception to the rule. We don't know everything, and oftentimes in situations and circumstances we overreact. The important thing is check out the facts. Then we can think correctly. It won't prevent all the anger, but I believe a lot of it can be prevented. So it starts with how we think up top. What do you think the next one will be? Well, we're not going to move any further. Oh, we moved too far. Begins with our thoughts. Our feelings control the way we respond. This is a bit over the way because what I put is here is she's speaking and the knives are flying. Maybe I should have turned this into a marriage counselling session. That's for another time. And it's important that we've taken the steps to look at the facts. Because if we don't, then our feelings take over. We allow our feelings to control the way we react. And once they do, once our feelings get involved, everything else doesn't matter. It's all coloured differently. And it's all centred on the person that we are angry with. That's where our feelings are directed. Someone did this to me, you're going to get it. This is where our feelings take over. God told Cain his thinking was wrong. But by then, Cain's anger had developed to the next stage. Now think of whom you feel anger towards. Think of why you feel anger. And the reason because you have this thing of anger towards them is your emotions are involved. Your emotions are involved. And now it's harder to stop that anger from developing. But your thoughts based on facts or your emotional perceptions, that's the two things you've got to distinguish. What's the real issue here and what am I feeling? Sometimes we don't want to think, we just do. And our feelings rule. We need to ask ourselves some questions about the situation, about our anger. Things may have turned out different for Cain had he done so. Sometimes we're pushed by our circumstances, and we all encounter circumstances that we don't like. Sometimes we're forced to deal with situations that are not of our own making, that somebody else is doing. Sometimes we're pressured by life. We're told, and this is the one that gets me every time, we're in this together. And you think, we're in this together? I'm receiving it. What are you doing? What are you getting? Very different stories, but we feel pressured by these things. And we're told if we work hard, we can achieve everything we want. And if we achieve everything we want, guess what? We'll be happy. How's that work out for you? Sometimes we're preoccupied with things that are beyond our control. And when they are, we allow these things to eat away at us because we cannot do anything about it. This may include hurts inflicted on us by others, knowing they can't be undone or taken back. If our thoughts are wrong, then our feelings will be wrong. Anger doesn't come from what happens to us, but how we interpret it through our beliefs. And our beliefs may be misbeliefs that are based on a lie. And what I do with our passage here, is using Cain. Because basically this is what it comes down to with Cain. What were Cain's misbeliefs about his rights? He was angry with God because he believed he had the right to bring a substitute offering. Even though God had spelled out the prescribed offering, God did not respect that assumed right. Now, they both knew what to bring. But Cain decided, it's all right, I'll bring something different. And he felt he had the right, or he assumed he had the right to choose and bring whatever he wanted. So if he's angry with God, we can ask, why did he kill his brother? God was a person that he was angry with, so why did he kill his brother? Well, jealousy's there. Cain was angry with Abel because he was the firstborn, and he believed that he had the right to tell the younger brother, Abel, what to do and how to do it. But Abel didn't follow Cain in his rebellion. And that disrespected his assumed position of leadership as the older brother. He didn't like that. Abel pleaded with Cain to bring the prescribed offering. Cain, this is what God wants. Cain in reply, don't tell me what to do. And that's really what anger's about. Don't tell me what to do. Now, how do we respond when someone starts telling us what to do? You know, I grew up in a Christian family, but you know, I had a hard time being told what to do all the time. What to wear, when I could be home, what I should do, what I shouldn't do. I didn't respond very well. But how do we respond to people who tell us what to do? When we diagnose anger, consider the possibility of having assumptions or misbeliefs about our rights. Just because you are angry, it doesn't mean someone has necessarily done you the wrong thing. Anger often happens when we think of ourselves more highly than we ought. We imagine that we have more rights than what we do. And we become angry when things don't work out the way we think they're supposed to. When we wait for someone, you know, you've said, be there at such and such a time and I pick you up. And you go there, and where is the person? You're waiting, waiting, and waiting, and where is that person? You get angry because? Is it because the person's not there? Or is it because you wasted your time? You could have done something else. Or, if you lived in Melbourne, Sydney, or Brisbane this week, and you were trying to catch a plane, and you had long lines that went all the way outside of the building, and it took you 2.5 hours to get into the terminal, how would you feel? And particularly when the boss tells you, you're just out of sync, you're out of practice. It's not your fault. There's not enough staff to do it. But the angry lines, you know, all these lines, you've got to wait. You look at your watch. Come on, hurry up. Who are you angry at? When someone betrays you, when your kids disobey you, when co-workers don't do their job, when you see all the injustices that are happening around the world. They're all legitimate things to be angry about. Something's wrong, and anger comes from our feelings of justice. They come from our sense of right and wrong. But anger is telling us something's wrong. It doesn't mean it's bad anger. It means something's not right. And yet, when we become angry, we're presented with an opportunity to do something good because we determine the next action, which will then make anger a good thing or a bad thing. What then is the cure for anger. And it's an emotion that each one of us will feel at different times during the day, the months, or whatever. But this doesn't mean that you and I are powerless in controlling it. By having a grasp on anger, we can ensure that we don't allow this emotion to fester and become strong enough to actually control us. Believe it or not, one of the first steps towards controlling anger is acknowledging, I've got a problem. I've got a problem with anger. Many people have issues with admitting they are angry. And this is problematic because no issue can be fixed or dealt with until it's at least acknowledged. If a person refuses to acknowledge, I haven't got a problem with anger, you can't help that person. Until they can see that anger is controlling them, you can't help them. And you never want to be in a position where you find yourself unable to control the feelings of anger. Because when you're in this place, it means anger controls you. And because it controls you, it's a recipe for disaster. When someone is unable to control their anger, they lash out and do things they wouldn't either do or normally do, and they begin to regret it later on. Anger is not inherently a bad emotion, but when it controls you, instead of you controlling it, that's when danger arrives. And God said to Cain, very simply, don't let anger get to you. I can help you. And for the Christian this morning, that's something that we need to understand. Do Christians get angry? Yep. Do they let anger control them? Yep, they do. Sadly, many won't admit it, but anger can control them. Now in Genesis 4, 6 and 7, the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry and why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. And here, God is doing something for Cain. Cain doesn't recognize he has a problem with anger. He doesn't see it. And God called him out on it. It's like he said, hey man, what's up? Why are you angry? What's causing this problem? Why are you feeling the way you're feeling? God is telling him, don't let anger get to you. I can help you. Don't let it control you. You control it. It sounds great. But again, anger is a sign something's wrong. And something was wrong here. But you know what? I don't want to hear it, Cain is saying. I don't want to hear it. He's got a problem, but he doesn't want to hear it. Now, how did Cain respond to God's words of encouragement and his offer of help? In verse 8, Cain spoke to his brother Abel, and when they were in the field, Cain revolted against his brother Abel and killed him. That's how he dealt with his anger. He killed him. No, don't want to hear it. I haven't got a problem. But he killed him, killed his brother. Now, Cain, when we look at it, anger often leads us to do things which are wrong. And in this case, too many people become hurt. Now, Cain knew something was wrong. He knew it. His emotions told him something. He was angry, he was dejected, and God spoke to him about it. Why are you angry, man? Why is your face down the floor? Why are you letting this control you? I can help you. Don't want to hear it. So he knew that something was wrong. But instead of learning what was wrong, all that Cain was interested was get rid of the problem. Now the problem was anger. But as far as he was concerned, you know what, my brother's the problem. If I get rid of him, it's not a problem anymore. That was his thinking. The problem wasn't Abel. Abel hadn't done anything wrong. All he had done was give God an offering. So Cain's problem wasn't his brother. Cain's real problem wasn't Abel. His problem was with God. That was what his problem was. Instead of directing his anger at God, what did he do? He directed it at somebody that was close by, his brother, Abel, and he killed him. His brother who didn't do anything except bring an offering to God. That's all. All it did was increase the pain and heartache for Cain. His brother was dead. His parents were grieving. He was guilty. He was afraid. And more isolated than ever. So, in other words, what good was Cain's anger to his brother? What did it accomplish? Did the problem go away? No, it became more complex. And I like the way a psychologist has put this together as far as people who don't like to deal with anger. And it's quite an interesting... You've got two animals there. One's a raging bull and one's a porcupine. It's a porcupine. It's a porcupine, Karen. Don't argue. I'll get angry with you. Most people don't like to deal with anger. It's been said when people are angry, they either become like raging bulls or porcupines. The raging bull becomes aggressive and wants to control the situation by yelling, screaming, and making sure everyone knows, I'm angry. Many are like porcupines. They are passive. When they're attacked, they tend to curl up in a ball, put out their prickly quills. Sometimes that's where we see passive-aggressive behaviour, which is also destructive. So, which one are you, a raging bull or a porcupine? There you go. You just curl up and put your spikes out and pity help you and get close to it. But anger becomes sinful when it's hurtful and misdirected. In this case, Cain was angry with God, but he took it out on Abel. So we need to deal with our thinking and our perceptions of the situation, both before and after, before we become angry and respond. Once we are convinced we've been wrong, we start to feel angry and we sin against God, we sin against one another, we're not compassionate, we attack one another, and the results sit heavily upon us because we didn't think. Anger never thinks about the consequences. It just wants revenge there and then. Afterwards, once the anger has gone away, then all the other stuff starts to come out, things we never considered before. But we can still deal with our anger even then. Cain is angry, but God tells him there's a way out of his anger. If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at the door. It desires to have you, but you must master it. In other words, what it's telling me, I have a choice. You have a choice in how we respond to anger. We can either do the right thing, or we can allow sin or anger to lead us to do something more that's wrong. That means that even though we might feel angry, and we may feel justified, we need to ask ourselves some questions. What should I do with my anger? What is the right thing that God would have me to do? See it for what it really is. It's sin. It's telling there's something else that's wrong. Don't justify it, don't nurse it. See how sin is crouching at the door and how Satan has gained a foothold in our life. Because the reality is, he's looking for a way to get in and use us, and anger is just one of them. Start seeing the problem doesn't lie with the other person. It begins with us. And you know what? The worst thing is for us as human beings, how do you feel when you've really let someone have it? You know, you fly it off and you let it out, and then you find out you're an idiot, that you've got the wrong person, that the person who's at fault is not them, it's you. How do you feel? You want to small this more. You went, ooh. There's nothing worse than that, is there? Sometimes it means we look at ourselves before we look at the other person. And that means sometimes eating our own pride. It means looking at our own sin rather than the sin of the person we're angry with. And that becomes harder for us to do. Our emotions are pretty strong. And we need to confess our sin to God, not only to be forgiven, but to be purified. As 1 John 1:9 says, if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. And then we need to make it right. Confess to one another. Go to that person and say, I'm angry with you. Now, not in anger, but just say, you've offended me, or I perceive that you have offended me. And it's not with the idea of, I'm going to blame you, I'm justifying it, but you're just simply going to explain that you're hurt and in pain by what they've done or what they've said. Because sometimes you can say something off, just off the track, and you have no idea how it's going to affect people. And that person all of a sudden, oh, she said it about me. Oh, how dare she? And for years they nurse that hurt. And yet when they go to that person and it's shared, it's a misconception, a misunderstanding. But for years it's kept them apart. Go to the person and explain what you're feeling, what you hurt. And we need to ask God to remove our anger. 1 John 5:14 and 15. This is the confidence we have in approaching God, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. And if we know that he hears us, whatever we ask, we know that we have what we ask of him. Because the reality is, God doesn't want us to be angry. Ask him to take it away. Keep asking until he does. And perhaps the hardest and most important thing is, forgive the one you're angry at. Forgive the one that you're angry at. Forgive them in your heart. And then, as appropriate and helpful, let them know you're forgiven. And that's how we're not to bear grudges with one another. Now, that person might choose not to forgive me. That's not my problem. My problem is to ask forgiveness and to say to them, I'm sorry, will you forgive me? God then can deal with that person in their life. Ours is to acknowledge our part in it. He'll do the rest. Our job is not to change that person. Only God can do that. And whether that person chooses to forgive us or not, that's their problem. But my problem is making sure I'm right with God and I've made it right with that person. What they choose to do with it, that's their problem later on. But I allow God to take that pain and that hurt, and he does, and he deals with that person in his own way. Now, as we finish, why are you angry? Maybe that's the question God's asking you this morning. As you sit in this auditorium, are you angry? Have you got it hidden away? Is there somebody that is causing you anger, is causing all these things in your life? Why are you angry? And God asked Cain the question because he wanted Cain to face up and deal with the roots of his own anger. Because he knew that if Cain failed to do this, the results would be catastrophic. And God asks us the same questions for the same reasons. Why are you angry? Honestly answering that question can set you free. Failing to answer it can lead to disaster. When I get angry, I need to let God ask me this question and honestly face the roots of my anger. Why am I angry? Why do I get so angry about things or people or places? We feel anger because we feel disappointed or hurt or frustrated, jealous or tired. Most of the time it has to do with perceived injustices done to us. Someone didn't treat us right. They've done the wrong thing by us. My anger towards others is a way of deflecting blame away from myself and avoiding my own issues. Often when I'm angry, I'm the one who is wrong, and my anger is merely the cover for my embarrassment or frustration with myself or my disappointment. And the question that was asked, I leave you with, why are you angry? Why are you angry this morning? And it needs to be dealt with. It's a warning light that says things are not right. Take a look under the hood. Find out what's wrong and deal with it as the team comes.